record. All right. Good morning, everybody. Martin, you look like you're at a news desk. I love it. That's funny. Okay. We are going to start in the little booklet on page 56. We are early in chapter 11, Parakut Aleph, and we're going to start with the paragraph that says, Lo Omar Me'inyan Hamidot. Again, that's Lo Omar Me'inyan Hamidot. Today's learning, of course, also today, as we have been doing for the last few days, we're also learning for Zechut for Refuah Shlema. For Halel Miriam Bat Rivka Nechama Tziona, she should have Refuah Shlema, be home from the hospital, the Karov. Okay, so what we're doing, we're going to finish up the topic of the general topic is Nikiut. Again, is being all the big things we're well aware that we don't do. All the big things we are careful of. But it's the subcategories and the subcategories that we've been discussing specifically already for about a week and a half or a year and a half already, the topic of gezel, theft, and anything that could be connected to it. We're going to finish that up in a moment. Then we're going to skip one topic and we're going to go on to another topic, and I'll explain when we get there. So again, we're on in the small printing, page 56. And the other book, I don't know what page you're on, but it's on the paragraph Lo Omar Me'inyan Hamidot. So we know the Torah gives us a specific mitzvah or prohibition, I should say, that we have to be very careful about weights and measures. If you walk into most stores in the civilized world, even right here in Israel, which hopefully sometimes is civilized, you walk into a store and you see a scale, and at the checkout counter, you see a scale in the fruits and vegetable section to weigh your stuff. Those will should have on the side some kind of a sticker that shows that they have been, they're under pikuach, they're under some form of checking from some governmental organization that says that, yes, that when it says it's 1 kilo, it's actually 1 kilo, and it's not 3/4 of a kilo when it's reading out 1 kilo. So that's fine, dandy, when it comes to the checking on certain occasions. However, we're going to see that there's another step that has to be taken. Take a look. Lo Omar Me'inyan Hamidot. I'm not going to speak, he says, about the whole issue of what kind of potential theft should come about as a result of inappropriate weights and measures in a store. It's already clearly stated in the Torah. It says that a person who cheats somebody by putting a kilo of what he thinks is a kilo of grapes on a scale, and the scale reads out a kilo, and it's actually only 3/4 of a kilo, and he charges him for the full kilo, that's a to'eva, which means it's an abomination. Ve'amru, and furthermore they said, kashet, and this is kind of hard to understand, but I'm not going to get into too much depth. Kashet onshan shel midot me onshan shel arayot. That a person's onesh is even more severe when it comes, punishment from Hashem is even more severe when it comes to cheating someone in that manner of wrong weights and measures than when a person is involved in some sort of illicit action when it comes to arayot. And they also said there's a halacha, which unless you yourself happen to be a merchant, a wholesaler, own a store or shop where you sell things by the weight, you may not be aware of this halacha, but it is halacha. There's a requirement. If someone has, now today we have mostly electronic scales, but in the olden days, and that's not so long ago, they would have the physical weights, size of like a half kilo, 1/4 kilo, kilo and a half, and they would use those weights on a scale to balance out the amount against the on the other side of the scale to see how much fruits or vegetables or whatever it might be on the other side. And it was required by the shopkeeper to clean those weights it still is, if they work in that kind of a fashion, every 30 days. Why? So he says, why to such an extent? Because this way, he may not be doing it intentionally, but what could happen is that over time, dirt and dust and residual oils and things get on there, and it changes the physical weight of that weight. And by doing so, you are not being fair to the other person. You're cheating that person, and indirectly, you're compromising your own ethics, and of course, as something that is prohibited by the Torah. Kol sheken, even more so. He says, I'm not going to get into it because it's pretty straightforward. The Torah already tells you. Kol sheken avon haribit. Even more so. How much more so? The sin of usury, the sin of charging interest. Shegadolhu kikofer be'elohei Yisrael chas v'chalil. Listen to the words he's used. If you've been following since the very beginning of the book, you'll notice that he is not prone to hyperbole, or as one of my students calls it, hyperbole. Is not prone to hyperbole. He's very careful and measures his words. But here he talks about the fact that the sin of charging somebody interest is a tremendous sin, and also is a person makes them into a kofar. What does it mean, a kofar? A person who is an apostate, who rejects God. Let's put that in perspective. I borrowed 20 shekel from you. I give you back 23 shekels. So thank you. So now I'm a kofar. How does that work? So bigadol, again, I'm not going to get into depth. And all these things is true when it comes to straight out theft as well. It has to do with the idea, we talked about it briefly, is that you're making a statement that you don't think that Hashem gave you what you deserve, and you deserve more than God gave you. So you're saying, I know better than God, and I'm going to get it one way or another. Okay, that, again, I'm not getting into the whole topic right now. Pasuk says in Yecheskel that if a person loans with interest and usury, is that person going to live? Meaning that it is a tremendously severe onesh, severe avera. So again, you might think like, okay, how does that apply to me? If you loan, you all know that if someone comes and says to you, can I borrow 20 shekel, I'll get it back to you, that you cannot take more than 20 shekel. And by the way, technically, halachically, the person can't say thank you, because thank you is already considered a form of rebit. They could say yashikoach, you did a mitzvah, whatever, but you can't really say the words thank you, even though most people do. Another parenthesis, when you loan somebody money, someone comes to your door, a neighbor comes, look, I have to run to the store, I don't have any cash on me. Can I borrow 50 shekel? I'll get it back to you. Unless that person and you said that, let's say that person says, I'll get it back to you today. If it's a stam halva'a, means that someone loaned it to you or you loaned it to somebody, and you did not specify when you want that money back, and the person borrowing it did not specify when they will give it back, you cannot ask for that money back in less than 30 days. The person can pay it back to you anytime within 30 days, but technically they have up to 30 days. And not only can you not ask for the money, asking for the money is an avera. It's called ona'at, which we've talked about already. Ona'at is pressuring somebody, causing undue stress to somebody in a sense. You're not allowed to ask that. So if my neighbor comes to me and says, hey, someone, whatever, I need to pay for some delivery, and can I borrow 50 shekel? And I'll give them 50 shekel. That's it. I can't ask for the money. I can make a note to myself, it took 50 shekel, whatever I want to do. But you can't ask for that money back in those 30 days. Where else do we come across rebit? Unfortunately, there's a common action that people do that we have to be very careful about as well. And I actually am a little surprised he doesn't get into this topic a little deeper, because it really does bear a little bit more discussion. And that's called si'ah b'si'ah. Literally means measure for measure. Theoretically, I'm going to tell you what it isn't, and I'll tell you what it is. Theoretically, if you come to my door and you say, hey, can I borrow a teaspoon of baking powder? And then later on, you bring me back a teaspoon of baking powder, you're potentially getting yourself into a rebate situation, because you gave, let's say, this much, and the one I gave you this much, and when I returned it, or when you returned it to me, you gave me just a teeny bit more. So you gave me more than you borrowed. Okay, so when it comes to small amounts, the Chazal are not as concerned. But when they're talking about something larger, like for example, can I borrow a sleeve of cups? Okay, and you paid, let's say, I'll make up a number, you paid 1 shekel for that sleeve of cups. Meantime, the guy goes out and buys a new sleeve of cups, and now it's worth 1.25 shekels because the prices have gone up, and he gives it to you. That's rebate. You said, wait, what kind of rebate? I gave him a sleeve of cups, I got a sleeve of cups, but the value is more. And since the value is more, you have actually done the isur of rebate without even realizing it. So that's why it's always better if you can give back a little bit less. That's fine, because now you're not getting into a situation of se'ah b'se'ah. And also you also can just say, okay, that was a shekel, so just pay me the shekel. Also, I've had occasion where I'll borrow someone's car, or someone will have me borrow their car for a few days. And let's say I get it with 3/4 of a tank of gasoline, and now I'm going to give it back with the full tank of gas. That is 100% rebate. And therefore, what I will do, as one of you here knows, what I will do is I will say, I'm renting your car. I'm going to pay you for your car. So I'll give you 10 shekel. Now I can, then there's no rebate involved. Because I paid for the gasoline, I paid for the usage of your car, and there's no issue with that. So generally speaking, if someone comes to your door and wants to borrow a sack of sugar, a sack of flour, or a box of something, either, again, if it's a minimal difference, it's insignificant. But we're talking something already where there's some significant change. Then, and again, what is that change and how much? It's hard to quantify. You're always better off someone just paying you for it or giving you back a little bit less than they borrowed. Okay. So that has to do with rebate. Then he says,
ask you a question?
Of course you can.
I mean, it seems, you gave the example of this cup, a sleeve of cups. I mean, it is, I don't know if you're just using that as an example, but you seem to put some merit in that. It's a tiny amount, even if it does.
Right, it's a tiny amount, so that won't make a difference. Right, that's what I'm saying. It's kind of a,
okay, so
I can't give a number.
Most household items. And
right.
Yeah, so that's the only way around it is like what you said, like, well, I'll rent it.
I would say like this.
Can I say gift?
Look, the truth is that if you're better off giving it is like, say, here, this is yours. You're not borrowing it, it's yours. Nikuda, that's the easiest way. I'm giving you a gift of a thing of cups. I'm giving you a sack of flour. It's yours. I don't want anything back. They decide they want to give you a gift, that's fine. But they can't give it to you as a tmura 1-for-1 like that. It's okay, I borrowed it, therefore I'm going to return the exact same thing. You get into trouble when it could be a sack of flour or sugar or something already that has fluctuating price. If it's something that's under pikuach, they come and get you a liter of milk and it's $5.92, and you return a liter of milk that's $5.90. That's fine. Okay.
The value of money has changed, though, so you can always say that.
Value of money changes also. That's correct.
So I mean, you're always going to have a problem.
You have to work on present value, right? So no, you're right. If that's why rebate.
Can I ask a question? It's
one second. Sorry. Rebate is definitely one of those areas of halacha that requires a little bit more knowledge than most people have right now. Yeah, you're going to ask a question.
Because what sounds to me is that there's two things. Are you lending him a ream of cups, a sleeve of cups, or are you lending him 1.27 shekels worth of cups?
Right. You're lending him 1.2772 shekel worth of cups. It's the value. It's a value. Let me add to what you're asking and say, if a person borrows half a sleeve of cups, it's then literally borrowed, and they give you back a full sleeve, that is 100% rebate. There's no question. No question.
Right. But if you give him back
value, we're talking value.
But if you give him back the 27 cups that you borrowed out of a sleeve of 50, it still works the same way. You're giving him back 27 cups that he gave you. Right. But if the price went up by 20 agurot, then you're still giving him 6 agurot
so wait,
more.
So I say when it's negligible, again, this is very, very difficult to quantify. If I can find at least some definitive statement, I'll send it out to the group. It is, but there's this concept of, I guess, this fungible goods and ideas here where we're talking about what people would not be makpid on also fits into there. So it's not as narrow as I'm defining it right now. I'm being a little bit extreme, but I want you to be aware at least of the issue. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Sometimes you'll find that people borrow money from each other. Hold on, I have a question from the audience in the house.
What if you tell somebody you're giving them a gift?
That's what I just said. If you're gifting it to them, you say, this is a gift. I'm giving you a sack of flour. That's it. I don't want it back.
Okay,
that's fine.
And then let's say a day or two later, say, I'm giving you a gift.
They can give you a gift.
So
that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. As long as you term it as fine as a gift. Once it's a term of when the words are, can I borrow? That's where you already get into the issue. Okay. We have a deal with our neighbors. We each have each other's keys that on occasion they'll need to borrow something from us, quote, borrow. And we may not be around. So they know, whereas they go into the house, they take whatever they need and they return whatever they need, but it's not a mere borrow. They can take it. It's theirs. I don't want it back. They decide they're going to give it back to me. It's a different story. But try to stay away. If you stay away from the terminology borrow or loan, can you loan me something? Okay. And there are other areas where this connects to, but I don't want to take too much more time because I want to move on.
I
So he
just
says,
can ask a
yeah,
question.
of course.
Same idea with the cups. Let's say I do, borrow a ream of cups, but every store's got a different price. So it isn't like
Right.
the
That's
shul
why,
is it's 2 shekel.
right. That's
So
why it is not as exacting as I'm saying right now. Because let's say you
well,
might buy it
I
for,
bought 2 for 1 on sale,
right.
and then I'm going to lend one. So I paid half price, but the person might go out and buy the same thing, and the store doesn't have a sale anymore. So I mean, I don't remember how much I paid for it 3 months ago when I lend. Do you know what I mean? Like
I do.
It's
I do. That's why we're talking about a smaller amount, and that's a very, very broad statement. I know that we're not, it seems that Chazal are not too worried about it. Okay, but it's something that will be of let me see if I can find a good article and send it out to you. Okay, and make a little bit more clarity. Very good. Thank you. So it says in this pasuk that he quoted from Yechezkel, the Chazal tell us in the Midrash, in Shemot Rabbah, she'eino chai litchiyat hametim. A person who's involved in usury, person who's involved in loaning with interest, they don't come back with tchiyat hametim. Kihu ve'avak shelo meshukatz u'mutu'av b'nei Hashem, because he and the avak, the dust, the connection to that are despicable before Hashem. They're abominable. Again, it somewhat connects to the idea that you're saying to Hashem, you didn't give me what I deserve. I deserve more than you gave me. It's not enough you let me live and give me neshama and you give me life and breath and love and everything else. I want more. And he says, I don't see any need to go any more into depth in this topic, because the fear of doing something like this is already upon all of us, and therefore there's no reason for us to go into this any deeper. Now, next paragraph. Omnam, klalo shel davar, the general rule is, just like the desire for money is very strong, so too all the things you can trip up on in trying to have money. If you want to truly be clean and free of having any issue whatsoever of gezel, you need to be really well versed. You need to learn. Many people will sit down and they'll learn halachot of Hilchot Shabbat and learn about Yom Tov and they'll learn about Tefillin and Mezuzah and all. But to sit down and learn about these halachot of gezel and the related topics, many people never will sit down to read about them. And you don't have to be a great giant Talmid Chacham. You can go online and find out articles about the topic itself. And if you do cleanse yourself somehow of all these potential pitfalls, you've arrived at a tremendous level. Because people will very often do very well in doing all kinds of actions to make themselves pious, and not meant in a negative way, in a very positive way. But when it comes to staying away from any kind of monetary gain that's illicit, they can't do it. There are plenty of people, unfortunately, and I don't think I'm underestimating. There are plenty of people who are very, very wealthy, who are what we would term very religious, makpid and mitzvot, machmir and certain things. But unfortunately, the way they may have gotten their wealth is not necessarily in the most appropriate way. Let's just put it like that. So he says that when you are able to, and I want to go back to one example that I gave once already before, because it is something that's fairly common. When you are undercharged at a store for something, right? When you buy something and they charge you 50 shekel instead of the 58 that was supposed to be, and it's not on sale, it's not like, yes, they made a mistake, I just saved 8 shekel, it's on sale for me only. It doesn't work that way. That is theft. That is stealing. That's what he's talking about here, about making up these excuses in your head that justify doing what you're doing. This is what Sofar the Na'amati said to Iyov, Im avem biyadcha harchikeu, ve'al tashken be'avolecha avla, ki az tisa panecha mimum va'yita mutzak ve'lo tira. This is one of the things that was said to Iyov Basically, the idea being that you have to stay away as far away from any kind of ill-gotten gain and any other item that's not yours in order to be able to lift your face. If you can't look at I would say modern terms, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. I don't know if I ever told you, probably did, many years ago on the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I wanted, every year I thought about doing it, I never did it. In the shul by me in Chicago, I wanted to take a bunch of mirrors and put them on the walls in the hallway with a little note that says, are you able to look at yourself? You know, like, can you look at yourself in the mirror? Can you really stop and think and take a good hard look? Kind of like that to get the mind working, but okay, fine. Now, I'm going to read one more paragraph here, and then we're going to skip a couple pages. The reason being is that he's now going to go into depth into the next couple pages on arayot, topic of men-women relationships, and I don't want to do that in mixed. I've taught Mesilat Yesharim multiple times, very often it's in a mixed group, and I prefer if you read this on your own. There's nothing wrong with it, just it's not appropriate, I don't think, for me to discuss some of these things in a mixed group. Happy to do it one-on-one with someone who wants to, but just goes without saying. He says it for a few pages, but goes without saying that it's one of the other major topics that has a tremendous amount of human drive that causes a lot of people to trip up. He started with gezel, he started with theft, and he moved then into arayot, which is the next topic. And I'm going to just read the first paragraph introduction where he says, he says, keep in mind, we have been talking about, let's say, in my book, 1, 2, 3, almost 4 or 5 pages now, on one topic. That's it, gezel. And some of the subcategories, and some of the subcategories of the subcategories, that every single mitzvah has all these subcategories. Meaning, dude, there's a lot to know. And when you want to be naki, it's not enough the top tier. You need to know some of these other things too. I'm only going to pick out those mitzvot or isurim where most people somehow trip up. I'm going to speak about arayot, shegam hem min hachamurim, v'hem ashniyim lebal gazel. Now, he said that is also a severe issue, and it's only second in the list after gezel. Gezel's first. As we mentioned before, as it said that Mamar Zichronam Livracha v'Zul Rashanam, Rubam begazel umi'ordam be'arayot. Most people somehow encounter issues and problems with gezel and trip up, and a smaller percentage arayot. Now, if you're in the little booklet, Mesilat Yesharim, you're going to go to page 60. It's a few paragraphs ahead, and you're going to look, anyone else in whatever page book you have, you're looking now for a paragraph that starts as follows. Hold on. Where'd it go? Where it says V'hamadrega hashlishit. Okay, you're going to turn a few pages. V'hamadrega hashlishit. There's a paragraph that says about shmiyah, ri'iyah, all of our senses and how they relate to the isurim of men-women relationships. And now we're going to jump ahead. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, you read it; it's important to go through, but it's not appropriate for in mixed group to go into details. It's when I've taught it to men only, I go through it, of course. So go to the paragraph that says Hamadrega Shlishit. So he's talked about so far. As we said, is gezel and then an arayot. Now, there's another thing that's another human drive that has to be in check when we're talking about nikiyut. The next thing which we are drawn to, that we have to be very careful about, after gezel and arayot, and after these desires, the inyan hachemda, hinehu isura ma'achalot. Things that have to do with food. What does that mean? We know we don't eat non-kosher. So a number of years ago, I wrote a little brief article. It was called The Hechsher of the EEI. I'm sure none of you has ever heard of that hechsher because I made it up. The hechsher of the EEI is everyone eats it. What could be wrong with it? Of course, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm sure it's okay. Everyone eats that. Okay, so let's see about the Hechsher, the EEI, and what he talks about here. Whether it's something mamash treif, not kosher, or something in what's called a mixture, whether it's meat and milk, or it has to do with chelev, which is not kosher fat, blood, things that are cooked by non-Jews. I'm going to go into some depth in this paragraph. I'm just going to translate, but I go with some of these for halachic issues. And yayin, what's called stam yeinam. Okay, before I get into definitions here, let me mention what's this business about basar v'chalav? You know you don't eat meat and milk. What is remember, what's his goal here in this chapter? His goal is to say, hey, these big things we know about, but don't forget there's these little things that come aside that really trip us up. We know about basar v'chalav, right? We know treif. You don't eat treif. So he's going to explain this, again, the justification. For example, let's say someone keeps 6 hours between meat and milk, and they had a hamburger. No, let's say they had chicken. 5 hours later, into the 6th hour, someone brings them a pint of Ben & Jerry's made here only in Israel, and the ones that are in the United States, Yamach Shemam. And it looks good. It's absolutely your favorite flavor. But you wait 6 hours, but oh, wait a minute. There is a shita, and a very legitimate one, that says if you had chicken, not meat, once you're into the 6th hour, you can already have chalavi. But that's not your minhag. Okay, it's what I refer to many times as a la carte Judaism, pick and choose. When you decide to make something okay for yourself, when it's not, because that's your custom. To just decide on your own to go from 6 hours down to 3 hours. There has to be a legitimate halachic reason for it. I've actually worked with a few people on that over the years. And I'll tell you a funny story. There's a couple of years ago that I married, that he was Dutch, i.e. 1 hour between Bisari and Chalavi. And when I found that out, I said to his Kala, I knew the Kala, I didn't know the Chatan at first. I said, whoa, you really made out like a bandit. You probably waited 6 hours, now you go down to lunch. Says, I'm vegan. Made no difference there. I said, what a waste. Can't you like auction that off to somebody? Like, I'll buy it. So in any case, and just as another parenthetical statement, it's more practical when a person waits 1 hour or 3 hours to encounter the following scenario. You're eating a bisari meal and you finish the meal, and now you want to have ice cream for dessert. Again, it's been an hour since you had the meat. Perfectly fine, perfectly legitimate as long as you've rinsed your mouth out. You may take a bite of bread, that's fine. However, it cannot be part of the same meal as far as a bracha, meaning you have to have said al mechia or benched before. Asked, if she auctions it off as a rebate issue. If she does, I'll get back to you. I'll find a way to justify it's not rebate. Don't worry. Exactly. So where was I here? So what you have to do is you have to bench before you have the chalavi, or say al michya. You cannot have it as part of the same meal, which can occur. By the way, it happens. It's very common. I am told by, matter of fact, this guy was telling me that they could have a Bisari meal and a Shabbat meal, and at the end of the meal, they would bench and they would have a Chalavi dessert. It's very normal. It just sounds so strange, for someone's kept 6 hours his whole life. Okay, so what we're going to talk about a few issues that are here. One is unfortunately not well known, and one is a source of a machloket. Let's talk about what's called Giulei Akum. Okay, which is also known as Bishul Akum. What is Bishul Akum? If a non-Jew cooks something for you that is not normally eaten uncooked, and it's something that has some level of importance, a potato, for example. I mean, you would put it's called Oleh al Shulchan Melachim. It would be used at a dinner. You'd have it at an official meal when you would have guests. If a non-Jew cooks that for you and you had absolutely no involvement in the cooking, I'll explain. The food is treif and the pot is treif. Not have to be totaled, just be kashered, because it's treif. What does it mean that you had no involvement? It means that if you turn the fire on, if you mix it while he or she is cooking it, that's fine. You have to have some physical involvement. Now, if it works that your stove has a pilot light and you turn the pilot light on, that's always there and it doesn't go out, then that's fine, because now you perpetually have a hand in the cooking. Where do people get tripped up, especially here in Israel, is when you have an oved zara, an ovedet zara, it sounds like avodah zara to me still. When you have a foreign worker in your home or your parents' home, and they're cooking for them, you run into trouble. You could trafe up the house. Again, boiling water, cooking vegetables, those kind of things are fine because they're eaten. You can drink plain water without cooking it. You can eat vegetables without cooking them, like fresh vegetables. Fruit, they make cook some fruit and make it like a compote. That's fine. But once you're talking about cooking food that is not normally eaten raw, and you're talking about food that would be served to a guest, then you have then trafed up your utensils. You've trafed up the food, and it's a far-reaching consequences. So how does that fit into here? Again, I remember hearing that if I did the pilot light, it went out, I'm sure it was fine. If she relit it, I'm sure it's fine because I originally broke the pilot light. And before, anyways, Jews are the one who turn on the gas to come to the house. You come up with all these ways to figure out how to get around it. So it is a serious issue that a lot of people are not familiar with. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention to you also. The next one has to do with what's called stam yenam. Stam yenam is a derivative of what's called yayin nesach. So let's go back one step. Yayin nesach is wine that would have been used for avodah zarah. So for example, a non-Jew, a goy, would have had wine in ancient times. It's not even talking about modern times, ancient times. And what they would do is they would mix it with their hand in the wine. That was a form of avodah, of service to their God, lowercase g. Then that wine was prohibited for a Jew to drink because it was used for avodah zarah. As a derivative of that, related to it, is what's called stam yenam, wine that is, let's just right now minimally say, handled by a non-Jew. It's not exactly like that. That wine if it cannot be drunk by a Jew in certain circumstances. So let's qualify this. If you have wine that is what's called mivushal, most wine in Israel is not mivushal, but in most wines in Chutz La'aretz are. Wine that is mivushal means it's been cooked over a certain temperature. There is no issue with a non-Jew handling the wine. He can open it, he can pour it for you. It's not a problem. There's no more problem with it. When wine is not mivushal, a non-Jew may not open the bottle for you. A non-Jew may not take an open bottle of wine and pour it for you. That is a problem. You cannot drink said wine. So far, no problem. Where do we run into an issue? And the problem has to do with someone who is not religious. He's Jewish, not religious. There is a school of thought, and I'm going to show you a brief tshuva about this. We'll look at it for a minute together. A school of thought that says, when a person is mechalel Shabbos befarhesia, that's how you have to say it, mechalel Shabbos befarhesia, meaning a person who publicly desecrates Shabbat. They smoke on Shabbat, they are on their phone on Shabbat all the time, and they couldn't care less. That person, if they pour your wine, they can open the wine. They can't if they pour your wine. Let's say you go to a dinner and and you have a bar mitzvah, a wedding, and a non-religious person pours the wine for you. According to some opinions, you cannot drink that wine. Now, does that cast aspersion on saying this guy is a goy? No, chas v'shalom. Okay, but it falls into the category where a person is, according to some, is not allowed. That is the opinion of the Rabbanut Harashit. So that theoretically, any place that has hashgacha under Rabbanut Harashit, they are not allowed to. They are not allowed to permit a non-religious individual from pouring wine into their glass. Now, that leads to other problems. Obviously, you have children who come to your house for Shabbat who are no longer Shomer Shabbat. You go to a wedding and someone who's not religious does pour for you. You go out with a client to a meal, and the non-religious client of yours or your boss or somebody pours wine for you. Now what? What do you do? Okay, so let's do. Oops, I opened the wrong thing. What time is it? Okay, good. Go back to here. Screen share. Okay, there are many responsa on this topic. I'm pulling one here. This is from Dov Lior, and he discusses here. I'm going to kind of give you a summary, and then we'll look at the bottom line. he discusses, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, the topic of Stam Yenam, about a non-Jew handling. By the way, Chabad takes an extreme version on a non-Jew handling wine. In their opinion, by Chabad, a non-Jew, if he looks at the wine, a Jew cannot drink it. Ad kedei kach, that when the wine is bottled, Kesser, Kesser, their Kesser brand wine, when they have non-Jews working in the factory, the wine is dispensed through a tube, goes right into the bottle, and the wine is never, you can't see it, like you can't see the actual flow of the wine. It goes straight into the bottle, and the bottle is green or blue or whatever it might be. So they hold that if a non-Jew looks at the wine, can't even drink it. It's a very strong, very solid opinion among Chabad, but not as far as I know by any other group. So let me start here. I'm just going to read a little bit and I'll explain. Starting from right here, where it says Mechalel Shabbat. Mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia, someone who transgresses Shabbat publicly. There's a knas, an enactment that was made that the wine that was poured or was handled by this non-religious individual is prohibited from drinking. V'lo b'hana'ah. You can have benefit from it. I could sell it if I wanted to, for example. Misibazo, for this reason, kozman shemechalel Shabbat patach et hapekak unaga v'yayin patuach milachutz hayayin mutar b'shtiya. As long as all the non-religious individual did, again, it's not just he's non-religious. He's mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia. He publicly desecrates Shabbat. Then that is, if they took a cork out of the bottle or they brought the bottle to the table, it's fine. Rak im hu mazag yayin letoch hakos. Only when he poured the wine into the cup. Oto yayin shebakos astur b'shtiya, that wine would be prohibited from drinking. Ma shenishar bebakbuk gam ken mutar b'shtiya, what's left in the bottle would be okay. Now, here's where I'm going to come to these two paragraphs of this next two paragraphs, which are Rav Lior's opinion and are of many other Rabbanim. Benosa. Yeshno mamar sharav Shammai, bohu kotev b'shem gdolei poskim. There's an opinion that's brought in the name of many poskim. Shiacholio, sharak bizmanim kodmin. Only in old, like prior generations, behem hashabat nishmara b'chol tfutzot Yisrael, when Shabbat was pretty much kept throughout all the diaspora. Umechalei Shabbat hayu mechalim Shabbat mitoch hatrasa. And when they did mechalel Shabbat, it was only either because they had to do it privately or they had no choice, whatever it was. Rak az asrut hayayin shemazgu lekos b'shtiya. It was only under those circumstances when the wine that was poured by a non-religious individual or a person who was mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia, only then was that wine prohibited. Ulam, however, mizmanenu, now in our time, shemechalei Shabbat enam osim zot mitoch hatrasa. There is an opinion to be able to permit it. Here's where he comes to his opinion. Here, I also, so too, I have taught paskin in prior years, many years ago, Tachlis. כאשר מחלקת בחורים דתיים יוצאי ישיבות הסדר נשארו בשבת בבסיס. Here's a good example he gives, where you have a group of Hesder boys who are on their base on Shabbat in the army. ובליל שבת המפקד פתח בקבוק יין מזג את היין לכוס. His mefaked comes along and starts pouring wine into everyone's cup. והגיש את הכוס לבחור הדתי כדי שיקדש. Says, okay, you make kiddush. כיוון שאם לא ירצה הדתי לקדש, יש חשש שיהיה מזה חילול השם, because it could cause a חילול השם, נראה לי שלהקל במקרה כזה. הוא יכול לשתות את היין שמזג לו המפקד, and he could drink it. Now we can take this into many different areas and many directions. Again, you have you're at a wedding, you have someone coming to your house, you're at a client meeting. Is there yesh al mi lismoch? Is there a way that someone you can rely on halachically to say that when that non-religious person poured for you, that you can still drink it? The answer is yes. Is it better if you do it? The answer is definitely yes. So when you have someone come to your table at a wedding, they want to pour for you, you're better off saying, I'll pour for myself. You're not looking to insult the person. That's not the whole point here. The person we're not looking to insult anybody. But it is the fact that someone can now there's another tshuva I saw. Sorry, I forgot to mention that even putting all that other possibility, all these things aside, it says that even if the person mechalel Shabbat b'farhesia, If they still make Kiddush Friday night, there are plenty of families that are what we call Masorti, who will make Kiddush Friday night, maybe even say make Hamotzi. They'll go out to movies and go whatever they're going to do. As long as they have some connection to Shabbat, even though they're being Mechalel Shabbat, you can, there's no, according to many opinions, you can still drink the wine that's being poured. Is it good if you're more careful to not? Yeah, because it's really being relying on a leniency. It's a legitimate leniency. But if you have a way around it, you're better off that way. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
If, let's say, at the Shabbos table, we've got my mother-in-law visiting. She has her aide with her.
Mm-hmm.
If she pours for herself, can I then afterwards pour from the same bottle to myself? She's not pouring for me; she's pouring for herself. That
right. So
bottle.
The question you're asking is, what's the
limit?
status of the wine that's in the bottle that she poured from?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, you shouldn't use it.
Correct.
Yeah, you should not use it.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I should not use it, even though she poured.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that she's pouring for me; she's pouring for herself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great.
And we're discussing it's mevushal. We're talking about the wine.
If it's mevushal,
Yeah,
there's no problem at all.
Not a problem.
This is okay. So not
We're
mevushal.
talking
Just
about
making sure.
non-mevushal wine. Right. The problem
Non-mevushal.
of yain nesach, which is really nowadays just stam yenam, is only when the wine is non-mevushal. There is an opinion that says that since even though the wine is not technically what's called mevushal up to a certain temperature, if it's pasteurized, which many wines are, even though they're not considered mevushal, and it sounds contradictory, it's still not a problem. There's still a Yesharim smoke when it comes to that. I am not well versed enough to tell you what kind of wine is, where it gets to, what temperature and all, but the general idea is if it is non-mevushal, treat it, you're better off with someone who's shomer Shabbat to deal with the wine, and definitely not for someone who's not Jewish. You can pour for them, that's fine, but don't have them pour for you.
Just clarify though what Susie said. It's only if it's a non-Jew is pouring that the rest of the bottle's a problem.
Correct. When a Jew, a Chiloni, a Masorti, some Mechal Shabbat V'Hasya, only prohibits the wine that they physically poured, that cup or glass. What's left in the bottle is still okay. That's correct. Okay. Tov. Okay. So today turned a little bit into a halachic topic, which is really good, important, because the reason it's important is I could just very briefly have gone through and say, okay, the yain nesach, okay, it's Dam Yanam, is the Jew, a non-Jew doesn't pour your wine, blah, 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 move on. But that's the whole point of this chapter. The point of this chapter is we know about these big things, and we have to understand some of the derivatives as well. So we're going to stop here. We'll pick up next week with talking more about food. And he goes on, not very long, but he goes on about food here. And I'm glad that some of these topics that he will be dealing with are just so important. I mean, everything he does, but especially some of the things that are coming up soon. It'll be interesting. Bezrat Hashem. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And
Thank you.